Today, we'll talk a little about what to do with data once you've got it collected. We spent the last session talking about ways that we collect data and all the different methods that we look at qualitative data and quantitative data, or the ways that we gather it, from surveys to pre and post tests and focus groups and interviews and observations. And so we've got all this data collected. Now we got to think about what we do with it and how we analyze it and how we make it mean something. One of the things I said was don't collect data that you don't need. You can get to this point and data collection is something that once it starts it can snowball. If it's data you don't need, don't don't ask for it. If it's data that you're not going to use, don't ask for it. I can promise you, you can overwhelm your participants in an educational program very quickly by over collecting data. So, and you don't want to be this guy or this lady and have just piles and piles of surveys and pre and post tests and things that, okay, you collected it, now we got to do something with it. Don't be that person. So data analysis, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get all this data and we're trying to reduce it down to themes or statistical descriptions, something that means something to our stakeholders. So think about what methods are going to be appropriate for the information and the data that you've collected. Think about your audience, your stakeholders. What are they going to readily understand? What's going to resonate with them? What kind of stories? What kind of graphic illustrations of data, etc.? What's going to resonate with those target audiences? And realize that different target audiences, different stakeholders want to see data maybe represented a little differently. It's going to tell the same story, but maybe in a little different way. So it's really important that you involve those stakeholders at every step so that, as you're putting it together, those stakeholders are going to learn about the data and you're going to learn what people similar to them will resonate with and what will mean something to them. So it's educational for all. Quantitative data is again those numbers, things that can be counted. So, as you're thinking about quantitative data analysis, think about the audience. Don't overwhelm them. Typically, something visual, something graphic will help with adding to understanding, and it provides a clear understanding of the explanation of things. So, very important that you think about how you boil numbers down. Don't just throw a bunch of numbers on the screen. Think about how you boil them down and visualize it so that people can understand it. And we'll go more in depth on that. Qualitative data for me was always much harder. And there are some people who are naturally drawn to qualitative data and find this very easy. I was not one of them. I'm a quantitative thinker. So this one could be difficult for me. But I do think it's very important that as your data is being collected in your mind, you should be starting to form categories and themes and starting in the back of your mind to drop data into those buckets. So at the end, it begins to be easier for you to sort and put that data into packages and piles that will begin to form and make sense to the reader or to the person that's looking at the data. So there's guides out there, there's books, there's lots of ways that you can build up your uh, skill level in qualitative data analysis. Go find some of that. I had to, in terms of things that I worked with. There's a book on naturalistic inquiry that's very good that helps you understand how to sort and how to analyze qualitative data. There's also software packages that can help with that. So if you're doing a qualitative analysis or you're ever working with qualitative data, it's not as easy as you might at first think. So do a little research and help yourself understand qualitative data a little better. We'll go through some very simplistic ways that qualitative data can be organized as we go through the presentation today, though. So what you do with the data, and we'll start with quantitative data. What you do with the data as you get it is up to you. That what some of these screenshots that I'm going to show you are actually from ScanForm. So if you have an opportunity to gather data utilizing a scan form so that you can scan, and then you have a computer program in the background that's going to spit you out some initial analysis of that data, it makes it easy. It very likely will be that you collect your data, enter it into a spreadsheet, probably using Excel or Sheets or one of those kinds of products. And then in the background, once it's collected, you'll run some general analysis of that data, and you're going to get some means, and you're going to have an N. The N is just simply the number of responses, and the mean would be the average score for each of those responses. This is Likert scale data, okay? So what you're looking at here was a score from 1 to 4 on asking someone after. This would be a post only, where we're asking them to give us their understanding before and after. So before, they said that their understanding on this topic was an average of 1.82, and after the educational program, they had an understanding, a self-reported understanding of 3.59. So you can see that's a significant increase. Okay, and as you go down, this is question 1A, 1B, 1C, etc. You can see what those means were for the 22 respondents that provided a response to your pre-post survey. So rather than just reporting the means, oftentimes it's more meaningful to break that down into a single number, something that someone can see, in terms of a percent change. And a percent change is calculated by the after minus before divided by the possible increase. So I said it was a Likert scale of 1 to 4, so the possible increase is 3, and then times 100 will give you the percent change. So you can run that, and you can build that into an Excel spreadsheet very easily, so that it will calculate all of those for you. And you can just build one formula, copy it down, and it'll do the calculations for you. And then you can put it in a table or something that takes what could be a very, very long spreadsheet or a very long output from some sort of a scan form, and put it into something that is visually appealing, that tells a very quick and a one glance kind of a story. So you've got a heading across the top that says, the participants were asked to rate their level of knowledge on these key topics before and after. You've got 2 columns that show what the means were before and the mean after, and then that percent change over on the side. And you'll note that one of the things that I like to do is put a little color in it, so that you draw your eyes there. Basically, it's just anything below 60% change was yellow, and anything above 60% change was green. However you want to do that to tell that story, but that's a much more appealing way to take what could be a pile of data and provide it in a way that's visually appealing, that tells the story, so that the reader can see, yeah, this program was effective, and they did have an increase in understanding. This, and not, I used the wrong term, not this program, this event, this activity was effective, and we did have an increase in understanding. Okay, so a very good way to report that. Maybe you've got something where you've got an output, or you've looked at a number of ways that you could report, and you're asking them about their increase in understanding. So, you've got something where you can say that 100% of your participants, 22% or 22 out of 22, said that their level of understanding of IPM in the garden was good or excellent after the program. Okay. Only 13.6% said that was their level of understanding before the program. So, you had all this data on the previous slide that was, it's really good data, but it's really hard to understand. So you've got to do something with that, and you've got to tell that story better. So taking all that data, where we asked them about their level of understanding before and their level of understanding after, maybe a way to do that is to categorize it. And that's what this attempts to do, is to categorize where their level of understanding is. So if 100% of them, and you can look at that data and say, man, look, we've got all of them said that their level of understanding is now good and excellent after good or excellent after the program. What was it before? Well, we go back and we look before. Well, only 3 of them really felt like they had a level of understanding that was good or excellent before the program. That's huge. That's a really, really large increase, right? Or you can break it down and look at some individual uh, subjects and things like, their understanding of low impact pesticides. Well, before the program, only 4.5% of them indicated that they had that level of understanding at good or excellent, whereas 95.5% post program said that they had that level of understanding. Okay, so you can put it in bullets and tell a story like that, or you can put it in a table. If you're putting it in bullets, you can see we've got 3 topics represented in that table in about the same amount of space as we had 1 topic using bullets. So it's going to take more space if you use bullets, but they both tell a really good story, and you can look at that and say this activity was very effective at increasing someone's knowledge, at increasing basically everyone that participated in the program's knowledge related to those entomological subjects that were covered: IPM in the garden, pesticides, identification of beneficial insects, etc. Okay, so a really good look at how you can analyze and how you can graphically tell the story of some data that was presented here. Okay, change in behavior is another one that we ask about very, very often, and it's something that as we talk about the most impactful things in an evaluation, a change in behavior is ultimately where we want to get. Okay, so we've increased their knowledge. Now let's talk about a change in behavior. So uh, you've got to think about those that were eligible to adopt, right? So if you're asking them about their adoption of a practice, someone who was already doing that is not an eligible person because they could not adopt. They couldn't adopt a practice that they were already doing, right? So you have to think about that. And that if there's somebody that says we're already doing that, you have to take them out of your calculation because they're not eligible to adopt. So what we're looking at is those who say that they probably or definitely will adopt. The question was talking about, whatever we asked them, are they going to do? Are you going to adopt the use of IPM in the garden, or are you going to use pesticides? Are you going to read and understand the pesticide label better? Whatever it might be, whatever that practice might be, we're going to ask them. Those that have they not decided? Are they probably will? They definitely will. Before that, the options were probably something like probably will not or definitely will not. Okay, so it's probably 6 potential options, including already adopted. So you probably got definitely will not, probably will not, undecided, probably will, definitely will, or already adopted. So those are generally the things that you would ask. That's the way that you would word your survey if you were trying to determine someone's intent to adopt a practice. And what you would want to analyze, what you would want to report in terms of what your stakeholders are interested in, they want to know those that say they probably will or definitely will. And, we can talk all day about intentions to adopt. Does that really lead to a change in behavior? Well, not always. Okay. But we're typically evaluating our program as we go or immediately at the end of the program. So it's hard to say that someone definitely adopted the behavior. What we want to know are those that say they've learned enough and we've convinced them that they intend to make that change, or they have an intention to adopt that practice or change that behavior. There's a theory that we base this on that's called the theory of planned behavior, and there's been a lot of research on that. You can go study, you can go look at it. The gentleman's name that developed this theory is Aisen, Aisen, Dr. Azen says that when someone has gone through the mental process of increasing their knowledge, weighing their options, and making a decision that they're going to adopt, most of the time they do. So think about that, in your own life in terms of when you've gone through that process and you've learned about something, you've weighed your options, you've compared what you're currently doing to what this new thing is, and you've made a decision that you're going to move on and adopt this new thing, this new technology, this new behavior, you probably are going to do that. Doesn't mean that you're going to maintain that. You may find something better down the road. You may determine that it doesn't work down the road, but at least initially you're going to make that adoption. That's the theory of planned behavior, and that's what this is based on. So we've been fairly confident in reporting these numbers for a number of years, and then we'll talk at the end about long-term follow-up and how important that is to verify that. So when you look at this change in behavior intent to adopt, what we're interested in are those who say they probably will or definitely will. If you want to be really conservative, you could only report those that say they were definitely will. So if it depends on how you developed your questionnaire, but you want to put you want to put this out there in that way, and once you take out, so if you look at the numbers that are on the screen, you've got 80% who say they probably will or definitely will, right? Well, you take out those who had already adopted, so only 85% of your participants, of those 22, those same 22 people, only 85% of them were eligible to adopt. So when you look at the numbers, you had 80% who said they definitely or probably will, and 85% who were eligible to adopt. So that's a 94% of those eligible plan to make that change in behavior. Okay, so think about how, as you're analyzing those numbers and as you're analyzing that data, don't forget to take out those who have already adopted. And as you're reporting that data, your numbers will be more reflective of those who actually can make the change. So, how do you report it? Kind of the same as you look at those bullets. You can use either a bullet statement and report what we just talked about. 94% that don't. This is actually this example was a physical activity health program. So 94% of those who don't currently exercise report that they probably or definitely will. And then if you have more of those types of questions and you want to condense and report it in a different way, the table that very similar to the other examples is a great way to report that. Okay, so you could use something like the table down here, and again, the colors you decide. It's anything over 90% is going to be green. In this case, that's what we did. Okay. Sometimes you'll have customer satisfaction questions, and we've talked about this when we're talking about formative evaluation. Customer satisfaction is a big part of that. So we want to know, are our participants satisfied? Are they do they feel like that things are the program is as they expected it would be? Okay, that's not as important when you get to the end of the program or you get to the end of an event and you're trying to report the impact. Again, think about the final report. It's very important to ask customer satisfaction questions as you go because you might need to tweak and you might need to make changes. That's what formative evaluation is all about. But when you get to the end and you're putting together a report for your stakeholders, the data that they're most interested in is what impact did this event or this program have on the clientele, on the participants. So you might or you might not use customer satisfaction. What we always say is if you have space, it's okay. Only use the most significant things and use bullets when you're talking about customer satisfaction. It's not as important data as change in knowledge or change in behavior. Okay, that certainly is more important and more impactful in terms of what you might report. But you could use minimal customer satisfaction data in a report to stakeholders. Again, I'm not trying to downplay the importance of customer satisfaction. It's very important from a formative standpoint in terms of making sure that the program as it's being delivered is meeting the expectations of participants. So some other things and some other types of questions that we'll look at just briefly here are pre-post tests. So, we've talked about how important that kind of data could be in measuring knowledge. It is the most accurate way to measure someone's true knowledge about the subject. We can ask them, did we increase your knowledge in a pre-post, a retrospective post type of questionnaire like we just talked about. But the best way is to give them a pre-post test, right? So we'll look at that data and what you might do with that. Open-ended questions, that's the qualitative stuff that I talked about at the beginning. We'll get into that just a little bit. And then economic impact data, okay? So this kind of a screen makes some of you just want to pull your hair out because there's so many numbers there. But this is a 10 question pre-post test. It's just laid out in a spreadsheet. Okay, so the numbers across, there's 15 participants right on this screen. There's 15 people who took this pre-post test. So the numbers going down in the first column, that's each of those is one of the 15 participants. And then going across, that's their score to each of the 10 questions, pre and post. Excuse me, the best way to lay this out is a 0 means that they did not get it correct and a 1 means that they did get it correct. Okay, so you use a 0 for incorrect, a 1 for correct. Very simple way to do it. And then you just go across and you look at you score their pre-tests. Okay, so every other column is a pre-test score or pre-test question. So you just go with a 0 or a 1 in terms of what they got correct on their pretest or what they got incorrect on their pretest. Then you come back to that person on their post test, you do the same thing. And again, it's every other column. You get over and you can very, very easily have your spreadsheet, have Qualtrics or Sheets calculate the totals for you over in the pre-test score and the post-test score. All you ask it to do is add it up. So you can see that, for the most part, most of our pre-test scores were 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that, correct? And our post-test scores were mostly 8s, 9s, and 10s. So, first glance tells you that most of our participants had a better score on the post-test, which is what you would hope, right? Okay. You take data like that, you have to summarize it. There's a number of ways that you can summarize it. You only saw 15. There were 56 of them who took this test. And this was actually youth that were participating in a junior master gardener program. There were 56 of them. So the average score on the pretest was 45%. That's probably not bad. You're giving them a test of information that you would assume they're not terribly familiar with, right? So the pretest they had a 45% correct. The post test they had 89% correct. So back if you look at that screen, instead of 15, that would have gone all the way down to 56 participants, and then those numbers you would have calculated in Qualtrics to get the big numbers, the 45 and 89. Okay, so and you can boil it down a little more, and you can say that every one of the 46 students increased their score on the post test by at least 10%. That should have been 56, but every one of those kids had at least a 10% increase. If you can say that really tells a good story, right? The maximum increase, one of them had an 80% increase. Okay, so you can look and you can put it in tables, and you can say that of all those kids that took the test, only 2 of them had a 10% increase, 3 of them had a 20% increase. The biggest number were right in there at 30 and 40 and 50%, where you had 13, 13, and 12 of those kids that had either a 30, 40, or 50% increase. They start to get a little bit lower again as you get to 60 and 70% and above. But somebody can look at this data and say the event, the activity where we tried to teach that information had an impact. Those kids certainly learned that information and know more about it now than they did before the activity, right? You can use graphs if you want to narrow it down and do something that's smaller, that doesn't take as much space. That it's not quite as descriptive, right? You can't pull as much out of one single graph. But if you just want to throw something up that somebody can look at and say, "Man, 89% post-test, 45% pre-test," that's about twice as good. That's not bad, right? So you can do it that way. Graphs tell a good story. This is a graph of my personal life right here for those of you that know me, and some of you might know my wife. I don't know that any of you do. You got to know this. So, when I want to know if I've done something wrong, here's what I've learned over the years. If she won't talk to me, it's about 50% chance I've done something wrong. If she seems sad, man, it's 25, 30% chance. But if she says that there's nothing wrong, there's 100% chance I've done something wrong. Just teasing this morning, guys. Got to lighten up the mood a little bit. But a graph tells a great story. That's the point there. Okay. So back to our story about the pre and post test. Here's another way that you could look and present that data. If you want to talk about each of the individual subjects and you want to tell that story on if it's a short enough test, if it's an 8 or 10 question test, and you think that your stakeholders want to know what each the impact that we had with each question or each subject. Here's a great way to do it. You can summarize. The question was, what's a monocot? The question was, what is propagation? The question was, what is a dicot? Right? Very basic plant and soil science kinds of questions. If you want to tell the story, if you think your stakeholders want to know what did they learn the most about, do this. Okay, do this. Put it out there so they can see basically what each of the questions and what each of the pre and post scores were and the percent change. Okay, great way to visualize and look at that data. Again, it depends on, you have to know your stakeholders. You have to know how much detail they want. You have to know what's the best way that you can present it for those stakeholders. But if they want detail and you think they're interested in this level of detail, that's a great way to summarize the data. It doesn't take a huge amount of space either. So you can put that out there and share that. Okay. Open-ended questions. Again, qualitative is it's not my game, never has been, but I will promise you, you have stakeholders in whatever you're doing, and you're probably, some of you in this class would much rather look at qualitative data than quantitative data. There's just no question. Some people's minds just process things differently, and qualitative data is just as important. So you have it. When you ask open-ended questions, think about how you're going to put that together, how you're going to summarize that data, and begin to build a story. As I said, oftentimes when I've got qualitative data that's coming in, I'm beginning to put that in categories as I'm going through the data for the first time. So it's something that uh, different people handle in different ways. I like to kind of organize it as it comes in. This is a very simple example, but we had a simple little program, and one of the questions was at the end of the program, we just said, what's one thing that you're going to go home and implement as a result of your participation in this program? This one was about food safety, right? So these were the responses. We had 10 or 12, whatever there is, you can count them. We had 10 or 12 people that these are their responses exactly as they provided them. So I'm going to wash my hands, or I'm going to wash vegetables, I'm going to cook hamburger meat thoroughly, place vegetables in the refrigerator, sanitize. You can see those responses. That's exactly what they said. And this is a real world example from a small little food safety program. Okay. Easiest way is to find those things that are similar and color code them. So you can say that washing my hands, sanitizing my hands, and washing my hands completely are the same thing. So let's color code those. Those are blue. Okay. Wash vegetables, clean vegetables, clean vegetables. Those are the same, right? Let's color code them. Let's call them green. So we talked about ground beef and how important it was to cook it thoroughly. So 3 of them said, I'm going to cook my hamburger meat thoroughly, cook my ground beef to well done, cook ground meat to at least 163 degrees. Those, while one's very much more specific than the others, they're all saying the same thing. So as you go through those, you can color code them. When I was doing one of the qualitative studies, the only qualitative study really that I ever did, I used numbers rather than color coding because then I wasn't smart enough at the time to know that Qualtrics would actually sort by color. I thought it had to have a number, so I just used numbers and I put them in categories by number, and then I could sort them that way and get all those similar things together. So different ways that you can do it, but however you want to do it, get those similar things put together. And then, an easy way to summarize that data is just here's the question, here's the response, and that's the frequency. So that's what you would be interested in reporting data that's qualitative. Oftentimes is the frequency. So there were 3 different things that had 3 different participants said that's what they're going to do. Okay, another example from a larger program was we just asked participants, what's one thing that you would do, some things that you're going to change, or actually, this was the most significant thing that you learned from this program. So, we probably asked them some very specific things, but what was the one thing that you thought was the most significant that you learned from this program? And then you can summarize those. And again, to get to this point, probably use color coding or you group them in some way. But, this was an energy conservation program. 18 participants said the main thing they learned was unplug chargers. I don't know how many of you do this. I'm notorious for leaving chargers plugged in. But they actually do use electricity when they're still plugged in, even if you don't have your phone, your watch, whatever setting on the charger, they're still using electricity. It's called the phantom electrical load. So that's one of the things that we teach, and obviously it had an impact with this individual program. Okay, so that's one way that you could take qualitative data and present it in a table. Economic impact. We always say that's the most important data that you're going to collect. That's what's going to tell the biggest impact from a behavior change. Okay. So it might be, a program might not be an economically geared program. You might not have economic impact. Okay. It could be a social or an environmental impact, but you'll remember what we talked about early in the semester. Social, economic, and environmental are some of the main impacts that we're trying to measure. Many of our programs are economic, and that's what we're trying to measure. So, what we want to know, is how many acres. This is a cotton program, so the things that we asked were how many acres did you farm, how many were dry land, how many were irrigated, right? And then that's some data that you could look at. Then we might ask, what's the economic benefit for your operation? Okay. So 16 people gave us an economic impact. And then you can see that there was a minimum, a maximum, a sum, and a mean. So the mean for that was about $5,164 per respondent. Well, we just looked at the number of acres, right? The number of acres that we had average. So you can back that out and you can come up with the overall anticipated economic benefit per acre was $2.93. That could be pretty significant when you're talking about somebody that's farming hundreds of acres, right? So you can do a short narrative. A great way to summarize economic impact is a short narrative and say that as a result of this program, 20 of the 24 participants think that they're going to have an economic benefit due to the changes they're going to make. The average economic impact is $2.93 per acre over an average of 1,176 acres, which is $3,445 per participant. Okay. Use bold, use underline, draw the attention to that. That tells a tremendous story. When you think about a program that, might have been free to that participant or very low cost to that participant, that they could potentially have an economic impact of over $3,000, that tells a good story. That makes stakeholders want to continue to fund your program. Okay. That makes them want to continue to support what you're doing. Another example was the Do Well, Be Well program. This is a diabetes educational program, and This one we're having. We know that there's research out there that says if people will maintain the behavior that in terms of how they eat and how they manage their uh, diabetes, that they will stay out of the hospital. They won't have as much health care. So, you can use studies and true proven data, which we do with our diabetes educational programs, to say that, those 28 people have the potential to save $1.5 million in future health care. That's over their lifetime. Future healthcare costs. That's huge. That's a big impact that your educational program could have on a relatively small number of people, right? So different ways that you can report that data, but it's very important that you tell that story if you have economic impact. And then, like I said, finally, long-term follow-up. So we talked about the intent to adopt or the intent to change, and how, we kind of hang our hat on the theory of planned behavior, which I think is very important. And I think it's very accurate, and I think we can defend it. But there's absolutely nothing better than going beyond evaluating those activities and their intent to change, and then doing follow-up to ask them, okay, you said you were going to make this change or adopt this behavior. Did you do it, and how's it going? Did it have an impact on you? So, what we've done with our evaluating our program as we go, our summative evaluation, is basically we've done formative evaluations throughout, right? We've probably done one kind of cumulative survey at the end that's our summative, but it's immediate post program. Okay, so it's a great way, and it's good data that we feel like we can stand behind. There's absolutely no question that a 6 or 9 month follow up with that same audience, or a random sample of that audience, is better. Okay. It gives us something that we can say, at the end of the program, these were our results. 9 months later, 12 months later, 6 months later, whatever time frame we pick, this is the data that we see. It absolutely verifies what they told us at the end, or maybe there's a little bit of change, and we can tell a better story at that 6, 9, 12 month post, right? So great way to truly tell the impact of our program and what the long-term implications are. And we utilize Qualtrics, a great tool. There's lots of survey tools out there. There's free ones that you can use online. Those aren't as secure. We've always felt like, for security of data and security of what our people are providing, we want to use Qualtrics, because we know that that data is secure, and it's not as accessible. It's not shared. So we utilize Qualtrics. Whatever you use in terms of being able to collect data in a long-term follow-up is very important. Okay, really good way to get true data about your program. Okay, so to finish up today, your rough draft of this is Monday, so your rough draft is due today. Sorry about the typo there. Finish it up, get it submitted by midnight. Okay, the rough draft of your evaluation proposal is due today. That rough draft should be your document. I know some of you are working on slides. That's great. You can present your slides, and I'll give you some feedback on them. Your document's going to have more detail than your slides. Okay, so uh, I would submit the document that you're developing, that your slides will be developed from. So get that submitted today. Later this week or first part of next week, I'll have details on how to sign up for our presentation time. Those presentations, again, will be, sometime the week of November 11th and the week of November 18th. We'll have the presentations will actually be the week of November 18th. So we got a little bit of time, but I'll get those up where you can sign up for the time that suits you. We'll probably do 3 different times, is what I'm thinking. So we'll get those up, and again, those will be live. So, and they'll be utilizing most likely Teams, but could be Zoom. So one of the two. Those will be up, so you can select your time. And we're getting close. We're drawing down towards the end. Again, like I said last time, everything you need for your final project has been has been shared. You will not include how data is going to be analyzed or details about that. You may put some rough comments about how you're going to analyze data, but this presentation will not necessarily be a part of your final project. And how we interpret this data is not really needed for your final project. You got what you need to get your project rolling. Okay, so just like the Aggies did Saturday night, let's finish strong and everybody do well in this class. It's not a lot of new data yet to be shared. I wanted to make sure that you've got what you need as early in the semester as we could. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Make sure that you don't, if there's anything you're not clear about, don't just guess at it. Reach out and let me help you find out what you need. I'll give you feedback on your rough draft and you can go from there. If what I provide you is not clear, don't hesitate to reach out and say, hey, I'm not sure I understand what you meant. I want to make sure that you all are very clear with what I'm looking for based on your rough draft. So it's going to be a good week. Thanks and gig 'em.